remember if we're a chair extra again.
Oh,
Okay.
you're in the pit. Yeah.
See that game on his own, we left that in control.
Oh, isn't this?
Oh, yes, yes. I was just talking to him. I think I know.
I should go to the end.
I like you here.
Oh, thanks. What are you sure it's like okay, you don't.
We should be friends. That's what I feel. Yeah, okay, great.
Universe stage actor.
Where do you go? No.
Can we begin any time here? Can we start? Thumbs up.
Tell me a profanity. Yeah.
All right, we're going to do a little horror stuff here, but other things as well, right? We've got an unbelievable collection here. The title of this, I'm told, is The Incredibly True Adventures and Twists and Turns of the Writer's Path. I think they gave us that title because all of these people have transitioned from various careers and are still transitioning, right? You're all kind of still moving. Sure. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I want to give you a very brief summary of each one, and we'll get started. Let me start down there at the end with Bracken. Bracken Macleod is the author of a host of award-winning novels and short stories. More recently, his short stories, 13 Views.
13 Views of the Suicide Woods.
Of the Suicide Woods has been described by the New York Times as superb, and then they went on, I'm not sure it was the same review, but then it went on and said that Bracken's thriller fiction is full of traps, some physical, some psychological, none easy to wriggle away from, which is good. Now, I said we were going to deal with the transitions a little bit. Before he became a writer, he was a litigator, civil and criminal at the state level in Massachusetts, right?
Yep.
Glad to be out of that?
Oh, you can't imagine how glad I am.
He was, in addition to that, a college, university philosophy professor and a martial arts teacher. So a lot of things going on there. We'll talk about that. So writing was simmering all along the way?
All along, yeah. It was an itch that I put off scratching for a long time.
All right. Lynne Constantine. Lynne is also an internationally known bestseller. She works with her sister, Valerie, under the pen name Liv Constantine, and they've sold more than 1.5 million books worldwide. Her latest one is called The Senator's Wife, right? And I've heard the review here on this one. I'll quote it. The Senator's Wife is a deadly cocktail of medical mystery, family drama, and psychological suspense. So you're writing about my life, apparently. Good for you. But again, talking about transitions and all these different lives that they're leading. You were also a corporate marketer, right, before you got started in writing?
Yes.
Very different career. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Dave Hill here to my right. Many of you may know him. Dave is let's list them in order here. He's a comedian, he's a musician, he's a writer, he's written for everybody from the New York Times to the Paris Review and Guitar World.
Yeah, that's
the big one. That's important. Odds are you've seen him probably as a host on HBO and Cinemax. He also is a regular contributor on NPR's This American Life. If that were not enough, he's also the lead singer and guitar player for his own rock band called the Valley Lodge, right?
Yes.
And Valley Lodge wrote a song called Go, which is the theme song every night for John Oliver's show, right?
Yeah, well, I wish it were on every night. Then I'd make more royalties, but it's only on once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah.
Last night this week or something.
Last week tonight.
Last week tonight.
With John Oliver. But yeah.
Interestingly, I had asked him in an email, I said to him, does he see a link between all the different creative things that he does? And he said, Yes, I think all of them, I try to entertain myself first, which is interesting.
Yeah, because sometimes that's the only person who enjoys it, I think.
And then let's see, we've got Travis Myers.
Yes, sir.
Travis is a retired police detective from the New York City Police Department.
Correct.
He and his sister, Natasha, have written a series of books, the Tommy Keene detective series, right?
Yes, sir. I write those with my sister.
Natasha's not here with us today. When I wrote a quick email to him just to say hello, I asked him about his life. This is what he wrote back. I think it's interesting. He said, I was a street urchin. I went to one of the worst performing high schools in New York City, dropped out in the 9th grade at 15. At 17, he joined the Army, became a part of the U.S. paratroopers. He came home, worked in bars and nightclubs, and then joined the New York City Police Department. All of that, and then he said this, so I'm basically wholly uneducated, but I've lived a full life, and everyone has a story to tell. You've got a PhD in life, kiddo, right?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, really. All right, and the last, but not least, Lizzie. Lizzie Stark is the author of 3 nonfiction books. Her essays and her journalism have appeared all over the place, the Washington Post, the Daily Beast, I think the Today Show as well, right? You've done some work on that. Her most recent book, Egg, A Dozen Overtures, is wild sort of journey into what you describe as the world's largest cellular workhorse. You will never look at an egg the same after reading Egg, A Dozen Overtures. In addition to that, she is a very well-known, internationally known analog game designer. And we got talking about this briefly before we got started tonight. So that's an interesting transition you've made. I'd like to see the link between all your other work. All right, so that's the short story on all of these. My name's Jay, and I've been around here for a little while, and glad to see you all here. Thanks for coming. So let's start with just kind of a general idea here. They say that, it's been said, I think, that writing is therapy. I'm just curious to throw this out. If that's true, what has the therapist, your writing, shown you about yourself that you might not have been able to sort of reveal in any other creative work? Your writing in particular, what does it reveal to you about inside you?
I write to explain myself to myself, and the longer I write, the more I have come to realize that I write my best when I'm doubling down on my own sense of curiosity. So that's one thing I've learned. I've learned to trust myself. And then my second book was a memoir of inherited breast cancer, a reported memoir of the history and science of the breast cancer genes. And the thing that was great as a writer about writing that book was that now I don't have to drag my family history with me into every room. It's remembered in book form, and I feel freed from that legacy. So that's 2 things I've learned from my writing.
It's funny that you mentioned not dragging your family history into the room, because my answer was going to be what I've learned is that I should stop telling certain stories at parties as if they were funny. Because, you write the story that's semi-autobiographical about a thing that happened to you, and you sort of relate it as, oh, isn't that funny and messed up? And then the people who read the story are trembling with, shared trauma. I'm like, oh, that wasn't funny at all. That was terrible. But
the deeper part of that question is, has it revealed something about yourself to yourself?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, no,
what?
I mean, it's a lot of short story writing for me has been, and novels too, has been looking back at something that I experienced, that I lived through, and really examining it with a closer lens than just memory. but with one of sort of interpretation and communication. Like, how do I express this in a way that gets the feeling that I felt at that time across to a reader, which is so much more of a deep dive into memory than you do when you're sitting there and going, oh yeah.
Have you ever been flat out surprised at, that's who I am?
I've been really flat out surprised at, oh my God, I went there. Yeah, I let that part of me.
Yeah, similarly,
Lynne?
I think one of the things that I've discovered that I never knew was how dark my thoughts could get, right? And some of the, writing psychological suspense, you have to go to those places. And, I remember when I was first starting, I read a scene to a writer's group, and it was this really, I won't go into it, but it was pretty gruesome, more gruesome than even what I write now. And I'd never met any of the people around the table yet, and except for the teacher, and he everyone's faces were kind of horrified, and he was like, well, I never knew such a nice person could write, something like that. Because, I think people were thinking I was some kind of like a psychopath. But I think so I have learned that, that I can go those places, and then I don't have to go there. Not that I have a desire to go there in life, I don't. But I do like to go there on the page. And I think I've also learned that I have a very low tolerance level for boredom. And so it's a good job for me because I can write it, I can immerse myself in a new world, and then when I'm finished, I can start something completely new, and that really works much better for me than doing the same thing all the time.
Not that I know anything about corporate marketing, but it seems like the antithesis of corporate marketing.
Completely, yes. Yeah.
I think
Corporate marketing is kind of a psychic thriller, isn't it?
Sometimes you want to kill your boss,
Yeah.
but that's...
And
Travis?
myself, I'll actually copycat off of her there. For myself, it's an outlet. I don't know about therapy as much as I'm a very nervous person. I always have energy that I got to get out of myself. And I found that since I've started this writing, it's a great outlet for me. Just to, like I say, let that energy loose. And therapeutically, I don't know so much if it's therapy or if it helps me that way, but I do like, although my characters are fictional, a lot of them based on real cases and real situations. And I like the idea that I'm giving some kind of voice to the victim, if that...
No, that makes sense.
That helps out. It very much, for me, it's, lifting up the underdogs, if you will.
Did you ever have problems writing you're a New York Police Department detective, so you were writing in some respects, obviously, based on events that you saw and felt and heard.
Oh, absolutely.
That get a little close to you inside? That's
Oh, many times, yes.
And did any of the other cops say, what are you doing writing
In
about
fact,
this?
well, I have, friends who have written and they written to me, talked to me, called me, and they know the stories that I'm talking about. Because what I've done, for the most part, to tell you the truth, I'm not that imaginative. So what I've done is taken a lot of real stories and fictionalized them around the Tommy Keene character. And that way, many different things can happen to him. I could tell my story, I could tell your story, I could tell your story, but have it happen to one man. And that seems to be something that makes him a little bit more endearing. And as far as the fiction thing, rather than doing a very long memoir of my life, once you do it fiction, it keeps you out of court. All right? I don't have to answer to anybody because on the first page it says this is a work of fiction. So, if that answers your question.
No, that's good. That's good. Dave, how about you? The same sort of question.
I'm glad you asked.
Inside now. If
No, I
anybody
don't know
needs
what
a
a-
therapist, it's Dave.
It is.
So-
Yeah. I like writing. Like I like not leaving the house, so writing is a great thing to do. But I think it's made me learn that I'm a glutton for punishment. Because every book I finish, I'm like, oh man, I really blew that one. And then you kind of wait, and then someone's like, oh, I like it. I'm like, oh, that was a good one. And also I think I kind of write books because my dad knows what those are. And he seems very confused with everything else I do. And I'd keep writing these books and go like, now do you love me? And he's like, I will get to work on the next one. So this is the fourth one, so we'll see. No, I know that he loves me, but I think he trailed off after the second book. I don't think he's along for the journey anymore. He does say he buys them, which I think is cool. But he's like, yeah, I haven't read that one yet. But every book, the last thing I do with any book is, well, see, the first book, I just used profanity as needed, and which is often, and I found through my sister that he didn't like that. So every book, the very last thing I do before turning it in is do like a search for profanity, the big three, and every book has had less and less profanity solely for him,
Solely
even
for
though
your
I
dad.
think the work suffers
Interesting.
as a result. So I would encourage you all to add your own F's and S's when you read my work,
Mike.
wherever, what, and MFs occasionally. What's that?
I was going to say, on Closing Costs, my last novel, my agent got back to me and he's like, why is the main character so coarse? I'm like, what do you mean? She's just, and he's like, she swears. And so I did exactly that. I did a search for, just starting with the F word. And it was an average of every page and a half. I was
I
like,
think
oh,
that's
she
a
might-
good, that's
she
a
might be
healthy
little-
average.
Yeah, she might. I mean, for me, yeah, for the characters in that book were based on me and my wife, and that's kind of how we communicate in the house. We work
Yeah.
blue.
That's my dad. If I can name drop, which I love to do.
Paul McCartney told me never to name drop.
Well, I call him Paul. No, but Dick Cavett, my dear friend Dick Cavett, was doing an interview in the New York Times a few years ago, and they asked him like, who makes you laugh? And he said, oh, my friend Dave Hill. And he said these very nice things he said about
This
me.
is not a joke. This is real.
No, it's real, Jay. And so I talked to my sister, and she's like, yeah, I showed it to him. And I was like, my dad, Dick Cavett, they're same era. So I called my dad, and he said, yeah, I saw that Dick Cavett interview. And he just said, pretty good. And then there was a pause, and then he just goes, now, does he ever talk to you about your profanity? Because I really think, you'd be better off not swearing as much. And the thing that he doesn't know, I was like, you want to hear someone with a mouth on him, it's Dick Cavett.
Really?
Yeah, I just...
Wouldn't think that.
No, he is a crude MFer, in my experience, and I would know.
How about you, Lizzie? Any part of that you want to respond to?
I am reminded of a quote by Camus, and that is that we must imagine Sisyphus happy. And I feel like what you just described to us about your writing process is on brand for
I
that.
often quote Camus sometimes. I just chose not to.
You wrote an interesting thing to me when we just did one quick little email a couple of weeks ago. You said motherhood has played a role in making you a better writer.
Yes, because I used to have time to procrastinate. The first thing motherhood gave back to me was the long swaths of boredom where you're caring for a baby. And that's I didn't find that very intellectually challenging. And so I got my interior life back. And I think that made me a better writer. And now I have about 3 hours in the week, it feels like, and so I can't afford to stare at my computer screen and read celebrity gossip. I have to get to it.
How about just general rituals you guys have for writing? Any daily rituals or weekly rituals or biannual rituals? I don't know.
Well, before my son was born, I used to have a set of conditions. They weren't necessarily rituals, but the room had to be, just right, and I had to have something to drink and, the right music for the scene that I was going to write. And then my son was born, and I became I gave up law practice, became a stay-at-home dad, full-time writer, and I realized that the only condition that was necessary for me to work was he was asleep. As long as he was napping, I could work. And I wrote my whole first novel during nap times. Now he's in middle school, and I get an actual full work day.
Now, you've written a lot of horror.
Yes.
Is your son into that or not?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, this last Friday the 13th, we celebrated the entire weekend by binging as many Friday the 13th movies as we could. He owns them all on Blu-ray.
I love those.
And I say he owns them because he saved up $130 to buy the box set on his own, like his allowance.
Travis, how about you? And just
Rituals, I would say no. I have to have complete silence. I can't have anybody in the house with me if I'm doing it, because any distraction will distract me. In fact, hopefully I eventually will learn how to write, because It's one day I can sit down and I will easily bang out 6 hours, 8 hours, no problem. And then it'll be 6 or 8 weeks before I can sit down again. You know, I have to find a way to discipline myself to, I think it was a guy, Mosley, said he writes 3 hours a day, every day, regardless. He has breakfast, he writes for 3 hours, and he's done.
How about you, Lynn?
I wish I could teach myself to do that.
Yeah, I write every day. I mean, when my children were younger, I would find, snatches of time, but now they're 23 and the house is quiet, so I go up into my office first thing in the morning with my coffee. I mean, I will go on social media and procrastinate a little bit, kind of doing that, or I'll do some marketing, but especially if I'm, I kind of do a spreadsheet. If I know I have a book due or a story due, I look at the calendar, and then I know what my word count has to be every day, and I just manage to that every day.
I've always been curious for writers, both Bracken and Lynne, you both write psychological thrillers on top of everything else, and Bracken, you kind of do a horror specialist. In a world so full of darkness and true terror, do you ever wonder if we need more horror in our lives, even if it's a literary form?
So I don't write horror, but I think I think all of it is an escape. And for most of what I write, there is redemption, there is, a journey that the protagonist goes on, and it really draws on their inner resilience, and there's always a message of hope. So, I mean, there are, things that happen, but I think in every life, everyone has trauma, everyone has things. So in some ways, I think it can be cathartic and it can be helpful for people to read about that. So in The Senator's Wife, for instance, my protagonist has had lupus for the past 20 years, so she's dealing with a chronic illness, and but she's not defined by it, so it doesn't run her life, but it certainly causes problems in her life. And so that sort of kicks off the book, where she's got to bring in a home health care worker who then she begins to question when, instead of getting better, she's getting worse, and there are other things at play. But at the end of the funny thing is, I know I've done a right job if I get to the end of the book and I cry. And so far, that's happened every time. And that's, I hope that you finish the book with a good feeling. That doesn't say that it's always a totally happy ending, but it's usually at least, I think, a satisfying ending, and hope, some themes emerge from that other than just pure suspense, because they're very character-driven, the books that we write.
I'll give you my Werner Herzog answer and then my actual answer, which is that every one of my books is a rehearsal for death. But in reality, I think horror fiction in times like this is essential, because it allows us to look at darkness, to look at pandemics and war and all of these things at a distance with control. You can, the most popularly streamed movie when the pandemic started and everyone was during shutdown was the movie Contagion. Yeah. Right? And I think it was a lot of people trying to face the reality of what was happening in the world in a way that was one step removed, and that they could pause and step back from and feel safe in the context of. So yeah, I mean, it's been harder to write dark fiction in dark times, because I mean, if I were to write Donald Trump as a character, my agent would laugh me out of the room, and he'd be like, "This guy's ridiculous. He's stupid." But then it actually happens, and you go, "Oh, okay, I can't do any worse than that." And so I have to step up to the challenge, right? But I think it's essential to let people have safe places where they can explore dark things.
Have you ever wanted to write horror?
Not anymore. No, I don't know if I'd be very good at it, because I would just there'd be like a guy and there'd be blood, and now where'd he go? I don't know. No.
How about your rituals?
Pardon?
How about your writing rituals?
I can't write unless I feel sexy. No.
So you don't write that much, huh?
No. I write all the time. Some good name dropping. Thank you. I used to, with my first book, I would think that I had to write. Well, before then, think I have to write all day, 8 hours a day or whatever. And then when I was writing my first book, I was freaking out about it. and you know, how am I going to do this and meet the deadlines and all that? And then one of my dear friends, Malcolm Gladwell, thank you. We live right by each other, and I would always see him in the coffee shops in the neighborhood on his laptop, and I would always think like, oh, he must be writing like 12 hours a day to like, you know, write all those bestsellers. And then, so I asked him, and he's like, no, I only write 2 hours a day. And he's on his laptop. I'm like, what are you doing right now? He's like, oh, I'm just on Facebook. And so I said, you only write 2 hours? And I'm like, what do you do the rest of the day? And he's like, I go running, and get like hot chocolate at Chelsea Market. And so that tiny bit of advice freed me, because I was like, if he's only writing 2 hours, I don't have to write more than 2 hours. So I started writing 2 hours. You know, I would go longer if I felt good and, you know, was in a role, but I would just 2 hours without internet or phone or anything, and I found I got more done, way more done in 2 hours uninterrupted than if I, you know, gave myself the whole day. And then another thing I think is good is...
Anybody can jump in at any point.
No, I just wanted to say to that point, you know, the uninterrupted, which is the great thing, you're absolutely right. If you can, and that's the problem I have, is I stop and check an email or, right? But I was, you know, reading a book talking about that, and yeah, I got like 5,000 words done in 2 hours, but I can't.
Yeah, it's because if you give yourself all day, if you have the luxury of giving, then you start to go like, well, I should really learn how to bake muffins first.
Yeah.
Another thing, again, more name dropping, Dick Cavett mentioned earlier, he was talking to me about, and I don't know if he came up with this, but, you know, say like you want to pick a number, 1,500 words, you stop on the word, and almost invariably you end mid-sentence. So when you come back to it the next day, it's kind of like a tennis ball just frozen. You know, you can just get back to it, swat at it.
It's smart, though.
There's also the part of writing that's the work that is not work. So I think like 15% of what writers do is, you know, butt in chair in front of computer. And a lot of the other work is the mental work that happens like in your hindbrain while you're sleeping or you're walking or you're doing other things. And, but because of the way our culture values work, I don't know about you all, but I have a real tendency to devalue that part of the process. So, I don't know. How often do I work? I'm like working all of the time, but also, you know, a couple hours a day is really enough to do the actual writing part of things.
You know, but you're so right. It's the same thing. All of a sudden, I may be writing and I'm stuck, and then I'll go and I'll work out. And then while you're working out, don't you think of like, oh, I should do this, or I can do, right? Or you're in the, it's that time when you're not stressing about it.
Showers and
Showers,
naps, I think, are the secret.
and driving.
And driving, yeah.
That's when the best ideas come.
It is,
They
yeah.
just pop into your head. You gotta jot them down, or you know, make a note of it.
Yep.
But it's always at the most inopportune time.
Right.
Yeah,
is
no,
when you have the best ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not working when I'm driving because I live in the Boston area, so it's just constant rage.
Yeah, I get that.
But
Is that why you write
I actually
more?
found I had to overcome the guilt of lying in a dark room, like on my bed, you know, over the covers, lights out, no stimuli whatsoever, and the creative part of my brain just turns on like a light switch. But exactly to your point, the whole culture around work is, I should be sitting at my computer doing this. And I realized that an hour in a dark room solves so many literary problems that I have with my work, that it's an invaluable part of the workday to just kind of like meditate with nothing, like literally nothing, a dark room. The funny story that has nothing to do with writing is earlier we were talking in the green room, and I thought I was going to impress someone with my cosmopolitan social thing, and mention that I had listened to a Malcolm Gladwell podcast once, and you know, not to drop names, but I have listened to Malcolm Gladwell once or twice. Yeah.
Oh, he just
Dick
texted
Cavett
me,
speaks
excuse
very
me.
highly of you, by the way. You're a comic.
It's debatable. I mean, it depends who you ask, you know.
What do you?
Yeah.
What do you make all these other people as a comic? Is there a comedy routine available in this material? And how do you write a comedy routine? Is it different than writing a book?
Yeah, I mean, but with books, and you sit down and you write it, and then comedy, for me anyway, I can't sit down. I just have to walk around and do other sort of, do other things, and then something will occur to me. And I just kind of think, well, most of my creative output I think of sort of as like a snail leaves like a trail of goo, and then think, ta-da! That's my work. But writing, you
Actually,
sit
I read
down.
a review in the New York Times that said that. It said,
I'm in New York
kind
Times.
of goo.
No,
Ta-da.
I'm only in the crime section. I don't think they're right. Yeah. But no, comedy, I just kind of have to wait until it occurs to me and then kind of noodle on it.
Lizzie, you said something in one of your emails, and it was basically that all writing is play. And then you said that the very next line after a colon was, you have to fail forward.
Oh yeah, that's something I learned from game design. In one of the role-playing game scenes I'm a part of, there's a play aesthetic called Playing to Lose. And it says that losing, it can be more fun and more interesting than succeeding, to play as a character. And I take that into my writing life because if something doesn't work, if I'm failing, then it's my job to turn it into an advantage for the book. Like if I get really bored when I'm reading about something, maybe that's a sign that that doesn't belong in the book, and instead I should write about the clown egg register, which is of course the informal copyright code of clowns.
What?
I gotta be really honest. When I read Liz's biography for the first time, that was my reaction to most of it. What is she doing? I didn't understand like 80% of it, and that's because I'm of another generation. Game design, what's the link here between game design, analog game design, and your writing?
The link is that it's play. If I'm not playing when I'm writing, the reader will be bored, and I will be bored, and the book will be heavy, and that's not who I am, and that's not what I write. So for me, play is the wiggle and jiggle room in something. It's the place where I just can't wait to tell you the weird story from medical history that I've learned. And that ultimately, that practice is what's brought me back, what I've brought back into my writing process. Another thing about game design is that there are a lot of ideas that ultimately don't work out, and maybe you've invested 5, 10, 15, a year of work into creating a game that is ultimately not feasible. And at the end of the day, I guess my philosophy is that ideas are cheap and labor is not cheap. And it's okay to let something go and move on. And that's another way of failing forward, using the failure to move my career arc forward or to move the game narrative forward. And just to alleviate your confusion about LARP, it is like improv theater, but performed without an audience, only participants.
What is this live action role playing? What's that?
That is what LARP is, yeah.
And can you write about that, or is that something that has to be physically enjoyed in the process?
I'm not sure what you're asking quite.
Well, have you ever written anything specifically about LARP?
Oh yeah, my first book is called Leaving Mundania, and it's a journalistic exploration of the world of LARP in the US and Nordic countries. And I did a lot of fun stuff. I was in a medieval game for like a year. Every weekend, people meet down in New Jersey, and it's sort of a Middle Earth in the woods kind of situation. So I did that. I let Cthulhu attack a beach house. But I've also been a young gay man at the height of the AIDS epidemic, dying of AIDS. I've played the rock Porphyry, going on an existential journey. I have been a servant in the Jane Austen era world in a LARP that was 5 days long, set in the place where the Swedish king used to go to take the waters in the 16th century. I've been the embodiment of creative destruction. You can live like many lives.
Have you ever been tempted to turn that into a novel?
Yes, I have an idea for a novel set in the libertine Nordic LARP scene, and loosely based on Jane Austen.
Is it about ready to come out?
No, it's my Procrasta book. Right now I'm working on a book about how awesome old ladies are. It's called Crone, and I'm reporting heavily for it at this time. And when I get tired of working on that, I just think about, Nordic LARPers having unusual romantic intrigue.
Did you understand any of that?
I was going to say, wouldn't all romantic stuff between Nordic LARPers be unusual? I mean, that's the hope, right?
It depends on the Nordic LARPers.
If we were role-playing right now, who would this guy be? Let's make him into something. Medieval, I'm hoping, but...
What would you like to be, I think, is the important question. What speaks to you? If you were going to be yourself, but different.
Excellent.
Golden Retriever.
Great. Are you like a happy tail-wagging golden retriever?
I think so. I mean, is there another kind? Yeah, I think that would be, or just a dog. I'm just into dogs. And
How would the golden retriever shake its head?
I'm not giving in
Come on,
to
we've got to
this.
You're
play
not
the
gonna
game. We're into a
Next
game here.
question.
You're not going to commit.
No. And
I bet Travis would play the game.
What would you like to be if you were yourself,
Not a
but
chance.
different?
What
If
would
you
I
were
like to
a
be?
rock, what kind of rock would you be?
Granite.
Granite. And
Well, that's the only one I thought of, so.
what do you think a good existential question for Granite to have is? Actually, to play this game, the rest of us should give him an existential question, like, how can I be rid of my impurities? Or, like, what will happen when the volcano comes?
aren't you giving Granite a little too much
I'm really
credit?
getting lost here, guys. I'm sorry.
It's.
But I'll tell you,
it's fine.
as I would be a large piece of granite, therefore an immovable object.
An immovable object.
Or what am I doing as this kitchen countertop, maybe?
Well,
Yeah.
so, the answer.
That's good, Lynn.
The answer you're looking for is I would be like the Granite old man of the mountain in New Hampshire and just crumble.
Yes, so what does
He's
it
gone
mean
now.
to
He's
be
gone.
myself when I'm crumbling? And then you can discuss that with the rock next to you. This is a real LARP, by the way. It's called Still Life, and it's by Wendy Gorman and 2 other collaborators. And you play rocks with existential questions.
That's awesome. It's funny because I write professionally, but as a hobby, I do tabletop role play games. I've written for Merkborg and Dungeons and Dragons, and yeah, collaborative storytelling is a really challenging way to write because you're trying to write something that's inspiring 5 other people at your table, or if you're in a LARP, in an orgy sauna. That was supposed to get a laugh. Come on.
They call that a
Anyways,
helicopter workshop.
That's right.
What?
But the idea is that you've written something that would be a prompt for other people to fill in the story and tell the story in a way that leads, in a narrative arc that's satisfying for all the players. It's actually really hard.
Yeah, and it relies on apophenia, which is a word I just learned, so I like to use it. And
But don't you like the
apophenia-
solitariness of writing?
Well, I mean, the reason I write is because it's solitary. I have an oppositional defiance disorder, and I absolutely despise authority. My apologies. Which meant that I wasn't really well suited for firm life. But
Lynn can agree with that, probably.
yeah, no, it was. I would get into arguments with my managing partner, but it made me a good litigator because my story is the story that needs to be told. That was the thing about. I mean, to circle around to the theme of the thing. Litigation is what gave me the tools to be a writer because there's no jury in the world that ever decides a case based on bare facts. You can't take 12 people and put them on put them in a box and say, 2 plus 2 is 4. What you say is, this sympathetic person whose life has been disrupted by math, because the awful, awful Paul Tremblay made them study it, right, needs to understand that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and if you find that is so, then please fine for my client. You tell them a story with a character that's sympathetic and an end result that they want to support.
So I think that is the link. It's being, you were asking too, what is the link between what you did before, and it's being a storyteller, right? That's, whether it's that, or if you're a marketer, you're a storyteller, you're getting people to tell you stories, or when you're telling a story to solve a crime. And I think there's a strong, at least, entrepreneurial spirit in most writers, and that kind of feeling of not liking authority. I'm the same way. Like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. It's a problem sometimes, but it's it's just the way it is. So, and I think, right?
Well, I think back to the entrepreneurial thing, and absolutely that. When you say against authority, it's like the whole punk rock DIY credo. You know what I'm saying? You want to do it yourself.
That's where it came from.
You want to do it yourself. You want to get it out. And I'm sure everybody on this panel and every other panel that's been here, this weekend has that some sort of that spirit in them. Absolutely. We have to. Otherwise, it wouldn't get done.
Exactly. So.
I mean, yeah, if you don't have a DIY aesthetic as a writer, you're going to be a terrible writer because the whole career is self-motivated. Right.
Nobody's going to do it but you.
There is no boss that says, sit down. I mean, my agent does kind of pester me about the new book, but there is no boss that comes to you every day and says, sit down, write this chapter about this thing, and I want to see it on my desk first thing in the morning. It's just, you write the book, and if you aren't self-motivated, if there's anything else in the world you'd rather be doing, then you go do it and you don't write.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think that's the job of writing groups, is to be that boss. And I'm just curious if anybody else is in a writer's group.
I used to.
Both me and Lynn.
Well, we
write with our sisters.
collaborate, so that's true. But I'm the bossy one of the two of us, so it's really not. I'm the one saying, like, where's your chapter, and but I think it is helpful. I know it is helpful for her because I give her that. And then of course when you have an editor and they're waiting for something, but I think it's all different. For me, a writing group, I mean, I have a lot of writing friends who I trust, and then there are times that I may send something to a trusted friend and say, I'm not sure about this, can you look at it? But to be in a group every week, again, I guess I just want to be on my own schedule. I'm not.
I would never have the patience for that.
I want to write
I like working with my sister, but I couldn't work in a group. There would be too much back and forth. Now, when you do your collaborative things, I'm curious about that. Is there an end? Well, obviously there's an end game to it, but everybody throws. If you have 4 or 5 guys doing it, how does everybody throw into it?
It's play. So when I've written this thing, I mean, she can talk to it more expertly than I can, because for me it's a hobby. I don't monetize it, but you've written a scenario that has a beginning, middle, and end, and ideally people are going to find their own way to it instead of railroading them along a track that isn't any fun. But they come together and they solve problems together, and they talk to each other as their characters, and as the game progresses, they're telling each other your story at the table, which is kind of the magic of.
Sounds almost like a very advanced Mad Libs.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
I want to save a little bit of time for anybody who wants to ask questions from the audience. Before we do that, I want to ask you one more question, and that was about music. The link between you write music. What's it like to write? Is there any similarity between writing a great lyric and writing a great line in a book?
Well, sort of what you were saying earlier, just entertaining myself. I just try to have fun and like what I'm doing, and I mean, it's simplistic, but so am I. But I don't know, I just kind of do what I like doing, whether it be music or writing, and I look at it like, baking a plate of brownies. You do it, and then you set it out, and you're like, who wants brownies? And then if no one wants brownies, I'm like, good, I like brownies. And you just take them, and that's my career in a nutshell. No, I don't know, I guess, yeah, I'm happy when I write a good lyric or something good in a book, but then ultimately it's, once you release it into the wild, it's no longer, it's just kind of whether people kind of take what they want from it.
It must feel great to be able to play and music. You're talking about play. I mean, I would think that would be a phenomenal feeling.
Well, I think all of it, like, I think playing is really, going sort of tied in with what I was saying, I mean, when I'm entertaining myself, I'm playing, and I don't think I've ever accomplished anything creatively anyway by thinking, like, oh, this is work, or caring at all what someone else wants, you know? I just try to be my own audience, and yeah, playing an instrument is the same. And, you know, that's probably the most immediate thing you can do, is play an instrument. For me, is just tone, because, you know, everything else is sort of like, you write a book, or perform, you know, live. But yeah, I always, basically when I'm writing, in between I play with my dog and I play the guitar, and then
Your dog and your guitar.
and then the rest I'm just
a good combination.
getting hammered. No, when the work day is done.
We have a question from the audience here.
Yeah. Hi, my question is for Dave Hill.
Is that Dave Schneider from the Zambonis, the world's only all hockey
Yes, it
group
is.
in the world, and also the best?
Yeah, and that was my question. No, just kidding. Dave, my question for you, which I could ask you after this, but I am curious because I just thought about it.
I'm sorry, what's your name? No,
Dave
go ahead.
Schneider, yes.
That's Dick Cavett over there.
This is your 4th book, and I know you like hockey because I know you personally.
Well, it's
but-
also, I mean, that's what the...
Yes, your book's about hockey. When did you decide to write a book about sort of things about hockey?
Well, the first 2 books were essay collections, and then the 3rd book was about Canada, sort of inspired by my grandfather being from Canada and telling, you know, me and my siblings that Canada was the greatest country in the world. So I was always fascinated by Canada because of him, and I wanted to explore and travel through Canada. And then, so with hockey, you know, sort of, I've been lucky enough that most of the things I like doing for fun is how I make a living. But hockey's the one, like, I think I knew when I was 12 or 13, I was like, it's over, Dave. So I sort of used this book to just explore my love of the subject, and selfishly trick my publisher into paying for me to travel the world, going to hockey games and playing hockey.
Hi, thanks guys. I'm just wondering if any of you have experienced writer's block and what you might have, how you might have gotten out of it.
I have many times. And like I mentioned just a minute ago, you know, sometimes I can sit down and write easily for hours, even days, and sometimes I can't get anything out. No matter how long I sit, I just can't get it out. And as far as anything that breaks it for me, it's just the next day. That's it. I can't get out of it until, for whatever reason, something pops into my head, and I'm like, oh, I got to get that down. Other than that, no.
I think there are times that I sit down and what I write I think is horrible, you know, but I just write it anyway. And I think keeping in mind that it's off draft, first draft, it doesn't have to be perfect, just has to get written. And that's the way that I deal with that. There's some days that it just feels like it's flowing, and other days it seems torturous, but I just make myself do it, and I can't get up until it's done. So
Can I ask a question on this lady's question? Something that I do, all right, and I don't know if it's common. I jump all over the story.
Yeah,
I may start
definitely.
at the beginning,
yeah.
but then I might do the ending next.
Yeah,
then I might go back to the beginning
sure,
or wherever.
If there's another part that you're more inclined to write, absolutely. But sometimes there's nothing that seems like that interesting, so I just write it anyway, and I say it doesn't matter. And even if you type draft at the top, if that helps, mentally to free you up, that's what I would recommend.
I mean, what I do is if I feel blocked on a day and writing isn't coming, I do something different. So I'll edit, or I'll read, or I'll find a way to do something creative that isn't necessarily this thing that I can't do today because I can't force it. And I know, you know, everybody's like, write every day, write every day. And some days I just don't think that's good advice, because if you sit at a computer for 8 hours staring, like Neil was saying last night, at the word and then it changes to the, and then it becomes but, and you've spent an entire 8-hour day staring at a
All
blank
work
page.
and no play.
Yeah, you haven't done anything but put up a roadblock in front of yourself and stare at it.
Well, then you also start to hate your own work, too.
Yeah,
because you don't want to
yeah,
look at it anymore.
Well, and that work ethic you know, and so if you're feeling blocked, go do something else. Edit a short story that you've written, or even just start a short story, or read a book that you love that has inspired you in the past and made you want to do something better. Or read a book that you absolutely hate that you think you could write better than they can.
We're almost out of time here. Let me ask one last question that was asked to me before we started, and that was for anybody out there who's thinking about writing. All right, you guys have all you've all of don't. Okay, that's good advice. You've all made all kinds of transitions. Any advice to somebody who's maybe doing something completely different right now? Any thoughts about what you'd tell them about making the transition to being a writer?
Well, I'll say two things for me as somebody who only started writing. Well, our first book came out in 2020, so even though we've done 4 books, it's been in the last 3 years. But two things. One, absolutely everybody has a story. Everybody's got a story. And number two, as simple as it might sound, just do it. Just write it down, write it down. If you hate it, fix it. In fact, for myself, when I do writing, and when writing does come easy for me, it's great. And I can write, and I enjoy writing. What I hate, and I'm sure everybody else hates it, are the rewrites. The rewrites kill me, because I have to read it and go back and forth and change and fix, and you know, and this is coming back again from the editors, from my collaborators, my sister, and that is really hard for me. But overall, do it. You have a story, write it down.
Yeah, and I would just say it's never too late. I mean, you know, it's really important. If it's something that you feel passionate about and strongly about, and whether it's writing, any kind of a career change that I mean, my brother went back to law school at 50. Yeah, I know. Well, anyhow, it's another story. But the thing is, yeah, because life is short. Do what pursue what you want to do, and don't give up. That's what I would say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your mind gets to your desk before you do, so try to write at the same time every day. In my writers group, we say that most writing problems are actually reporting problems. So if you're stuck, do some research, figure it out. And then I would say, like, find a writer's group or take a class. I think it's really, really hard to do this work in isolation, and you need the support of other people who are doing it to know that what you are feeling is normal. For example, after you put out a book, it's very normal to have post-project depression. And I would not have known that except somebody offered me, another writer offered me congratulations and condolences.
That would explain a lot for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. My first 2 books, when I handed in the final, you know, because the first 2, you had to actually do your changes on the manuscript and hand it in. And after both of them, I got really sick for like a week, and I think it was just my body going like, bleh. But to answer the question, writing, you should, I think with anything you want to do, as long as you or someone else won't bleed too badly, you should do it, because if you don't, some other idiot's going to do it. So you should just do whatever you want. And with writing, you can always just write about what you had for breakfast and then think of something better later.
That's a great way to end. If you don't do it, some other idiot's going to do it. So thank you all
so
very, very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you on stage. Thank you in the audience. Once again, all of these fabulous books are for sale in the Kamansky room right down here. And all of these wonderful authors will be signing on the signing table right here. And we are going to get ready for our next panel. So thank you all.